Here we are, guys, Eholt Summit. So this is the Eholt would have been around here. There's no buildings, there's nothing left. It's connected to the Pheonix and Grand Forks saga. It was the midway point kind of a thing. But we're basically going up and around. And Pheonix had so much ore, it was so rich that the gold was a byproduct of, like, copper and gold are typically found together, and in a lot of cases. And in the case of Pheonix, they were smelting the copper mainly, like copper was the main reason for Pheonix's existence, but they produced gold as a byproduct. So the byproduct of them smelting the copper was gold. And they produced so much gold, according to Bill Barley, more gold came out of Pheonix than came out of the entire Yukon. Like all the placer gold found in the Yukon recovered in all those creeks. Pheonix, the ore was so big there because the mountain is basically just a giant piece of copper, that the amount of gold, just as a byproduct, was much more than the total tonnage of the Yukon. Lots of ore up in Pheonix. Unfortunately, Pheonix was abandoned. 1919, the company shut it down, and people just walked out, guys. Tables were set. Like, it was just left to be the way that it was. Okay guys, so this is Greenwood. So we're gonna turn up to Pheonix Road in a sec, Greenwood Street, and then we're gonna go up the road to Pheonix, basically. Downtown Greenwood. The buildings have been all kept the same. We're gonna head up the switchbacks now. Is this another paved road? It's not gonna be paved for long. I'd be shocked if it was paved. So now we go up the switchbacks to Pheonix. That's why I didn't want to do this yesterday. I was tired. So we're now driving up the mountain. Pheonix is one of the highest cities in Canada, guys, 4,600 feet. So now there's a series of these switchbacks that we go up. Alrighty guys, so here we are, Pheonix. So this is the town site of Pheonix, guys, or what was. Pheonix is very interesting because it suffered a really weird fate in the sense that it became a ghost town and then it became a nothing town. This is all that remains of Pheonix, guys. This is all I have to show you. To the glory of God, this memorial was erected in honor of Pheonix men who paid the supreme sacrifice in the Great War, 1914 to 1918. And then a year later, after this happened, Granby Mining, which was the company town that this town was founded on, shut the project down. The prices of metals dropped, copper went in the toilet, basically it wasn't viable anymore to run the mine. So overnight, people up and left the town, literally. Like there was one day they just said, we're not working up here anymore, we're not mining. And then basically Pheonix was left as it was. Tables were left set. Everything was just left as it was. People's houses were full of furniture. There was a lot up here, guys. There was various hotels. Some of the finest hotels in the province were up here. Some of the best hoteliers. And then it was left like as if life just paused and nothing really moved. Nothing really moved. And it went from 1900 to 1919. That was the life of this town. And then when the metal prices dropped out, everybody just left. And then it stayed like that for a good 20 years. And then in the late 1930s, it all changed because people started realizing all the stuff that was up here. And so people started raiding it. And so everything was stripped. So piece by piece, Pheonix was torn apart. So all the houses and hotels were stripped for plumbing and wood and furniture and supplies, everything, guys. Everything was taken, basically. The Pheonix hotels had these old slot machines, these old 1800s, early 1900s slot machines, right? Really iconic. They were just sitting, guys. You'd come up here in the 30s and there was all around here, There was buildings, there was houses. Pheonix had a hockey rink, guys. The Pheonix hockey team, because it was a company town, the company had money to burn. They had such a good hockey team that they submitted a challenge for the Stanley Cup because they had a huge ice hockey rink, guys. Most mining towns didn't even have an ice hockey rink, but Pheonix did. But not only that, they challenged for the cup, but their challenge was rejected and they never got to actually do anything. But just the town itself, like, there was a lot going on here. And then the late 1930s came around. Everybody came up here. A lot of Americans too. There was a lot of Americans that came up because the border's like south that way, like a little bit over the mountains. It's right next to the border. So the Americans came and took over and basically took all the slot machines, took a bunch of the stuff, and then piece by piece, Pheonix was disassembled. And there's a really sad story of the mayor, William Banbury. When this all happened, when the price of metals fell and overnight everybody just up and left, like literally tables still set kind of a thing, Banbury stayed around and he had a hope that like one day Pheonix would come back and people would start mining again, and the town, because there was houses, hotels, saloons, everything, guys. The newspaper, like the Pheonix was self-sufficient. They didn't need any help. It was just a fully sustainable town. The population, it fluctuates depending on who you talk to and what you say. There's estimates, but most people say about 1,000 to 1,500 people, and some guys say 4,000. But either way, it was a big enough place. It wasn't too big. You know, towns like Caslow and stuff are bigger, but it was big enough. And it was all copper mining, guys. It started as an underground copper mining thing. So the Monarch mine, the Rawhide, they basically were, you know, tracing the ore body, the underground, the shafts, right? So they'd find a vein, and here it was magnetite, chalcopyrite, and pyrite is usually what they were finding in the veins, geologically speaking. And then they would chase the veins. But the Boundary region has a lot of copper and a lot of copper mining, but it has a fatal flaw. And they used to call it the curse of the Boundary, guys, was that the ore bodies here don't go to depth. So you have really rich surface showings of copper, gold, silver. And then as you chase the ore body down, it tends to get spottier and not as rich, which, you know, leads to problems. It started in the 1900s, 1900 to 1919. It was all underground mines, and there was aerial trams here, so they could load the ore on the train, the Pheonix Express, and then take that down to Grand Forks, which is just down the other side of the mountain. So the Pheonix Express ran 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, hauled ore from 1900 to 1919. And you could hear the sound of it, guys. Middle of the night, the railway would be thumping down the mountain, thumping up the mountain, pulling into Pheonix. The train was getting loaded, and then they were sending the ore down to Grand Forks to get smelted at the Granby smelter. That was kind of it. So then, you know, Pheonix stayed in its state. Then it was raided and destroyed. And then in the 1950s, guys, the Granby Consolidated Mining and Smelting Company came back up here because they hadn't quite gotten all the copper. Mining is relativity, guys. Ultimately, what mining is all about is you're only going to mine things, and especially certain ores like silver, lead, zinc, copper, you're only going to mine those if it's viable financially. If your ore is rich, but the price of the metal itself is poor, then it doesn't matter how rich the ore is. It's not worth the company's time. Same thing with the hard to access stuff, like I was showing you up in the Lardo, how like those mines, like 8,000, 9,000, 10,000 feet up on the mountain, like right at the top of the mountain. The hardest thing, guys, is you have animals, pack trains, right back in those days, that pack things up and down the mountain. You got to feed them. So if it costs money just to get your feed out there, and the costs for getting the ore outweigh the final sale, like what it actually is going to, you know, sell for and be processed for, then it doesn't work. But in the 1950s, they came back up here because they knew that there was more copper that hadn't been gotten. The only reason Pheonix stopped doing what it was doing was because the price of metal dropped out. But then in the 1950s, it came back. So Pheonix, like the name implies, kind of rose from the ashes again and basically had a renaissance. So it grew basically and then turned into an open pit mine. So they came up here, spent 20 years basically mining the rest of that ore body, like digging it down. All those big pits you see, those are big open pit mines of copper. And the Granby Company came back up here and they took everything, guys. And then when the mines that they were working ran out, they would move the town and then mine where the town used to be. That was a common thing. Pheonix had a similar thing. Pheonix, the actual town site itself, all the streets, it had a whole big, huge deposit of copper underneath. So then in the 50s, Granby came back up here and they just started tearing up the roads, tearing up all the old foundations, ripped everything apart, guys. Ate Pheonix. Anywhere around here where there was any kind of copper that was worth getting and smelting and processing, they came up here and got it. And then the smelter in Grand Forks would smelt all the ore. Nowadays, Pheonix does have a kind of a modern purpose. It's a ski resort. So there's ski slopes here. There's power lines here. I'm curious to see what these power lines are doing and where they go or what they're for, but they're like, you can see cross-country ski trails, Marshall Lake Road. So, but this is the general area. The only thing that's left standing of Pheonix, the only thing is this, and they pooled the money together, guys, to get this, to build this. And it's memorial to all the guys that fought in World War I, because Pheonix was 1900 to 1919, guys, right? So the Great War, 1914 to 18, it left a big impression on Pheonix, and a lot of guys left to go fight in the war. And you know, that was the Great War, guys. It's hard to really explain how bad things got there. You can take that other road that takes you down to Grand Forks. There's two roads, but they're longer, and so you can either come up from Greenwood or Grand Forks. See, there's these old pipes. What are these doing? Is this filled with water? So these old metal pipes here, let's see, is there anything around here? But you can kind of see that looks like tailings over there. And then in the 70s, it was considered, the ore body was considered completely depleted, was no longer worth harvesting. There's some interesting pieces here. Oh wow, look at that, guys. So that would be pyrite. You can see pyrite, a little bit of iron. See, there's some glints. I'm seeing some glints. That'd be pyrite, but that's still a good sign. But you can see here, guys, look, they've been moving boulders, prospecting, moving these big boulders out. This is more kind of rock. You can see, I always just like to pick up pieces of ore and see. The thing with the old days, guys, is these guys were picky. They could be picky, right? They had their pick of the mines and the ore bodies. So they just took the stuff they thought was really rich and would make them the most money and left a lot of stuff behind. So it's amazing when you dig through some of these old tailings piles, some of the treasures you'll find. You can see, remember I was talking about the quartz veins and the clear quartz versus the non-clear quartz? Here, you see that vein of quartz, guys? See how the rock is all fractured and there's veins of quartz going through everything? Like, look at that right there. Just stained up there. I guess so this is what's left. You can see why some of this is tailings, some of it's not all that desirable. But every now and then you'll get an edge. Price of gold back then was, you know, 50, 60 bucks, depending on the time period, and it changes over time. We're walking up to the mine here. So this is the mine, guys. So in the 50s, Granby would have come up here and they would have started gutting. Let's go look at the side of the mountain, give you an example of what they would have done. So you'd be prospecting here, guys, along this little ridge. Always good to look at pieces of float. Always study the float in the area. And then you look. See, this is all basically crap. But look at the fractures, guys. That's another thing. When you're analyzing ore bodies, you want to check for fractures, because fractures mean hydrothermal deposits. Stuff's going to solidify in those cracks. And if you're lucky, and it's in the right spot and the geology works, it could be gold. There's a lot of ants here. So, and sometimes it could be hiding just behind, like even with drilling, you could be out. This is really not very thick. See, there's little pieces of quartz in it, but that's bull quartz. We don't want any of that. Use the rocks you're picking to smack the other rocks. Is that? You can see though, oh, how it's all fractured. No, none of that's good. But basically, guys, what you're doing is you're just looking for In this case, pyrite, chalcopyrite. What these guys would do is they just walk along this whole slope. You'd get a rock hammer, ideally, and you just chip away at everything until you find something like, for example, this piece here looks a little bit like it could be good. This piece here also looks good, but stuff like this, right? So who knows, guys? Maybe they left some behind. Maybe there's more copper to be discovered. And now if you see quartz there, okay, yeah, this is a good piece. See, it's all red. But they cleaned this place out, guys. Spent 20 years just open pit mining everything. Anything they could find that was worthwhile, they went and took it. Because this mountainside here, like, this is a prime example of what they would have been mining. And float is just ore that's fallen, chunks of ore that have fallen off the main vein, because ultimately everything comes from a main vein. So whether it's placer gold that's flaked off and been distributed in the river, or it's a hard load case of just a chunk of rock, like a chunk of rock just braked off and fell, that's another good indicator. So like a lot of gold rushes were started by guys just picking up pieces of float and being like, oh, okay, this is here. Well, I'm gonna start look a little deeper. So, but there's trails, like they were busy here, guys. And don't give up on pyrite, guys. Just because you're finding pyrite, that doesn't mean that all is lost. Just don't be fooled by it. Pyrite is a sign of gold, guys. Pyrite means if you're getting pyrite, it means that gold is close by. So you just gotta persevere and see the vision, guys. It's the biggest thing with mining is you gotta be optimistic, guys, about the vision of what you think things are gonna be like. No trespassing. Active drilling. So this is Pheonix, guys. Well, I think that's going to be it. You can see there would have been towns here. I walked up and showed you guys the mine. That's no trespassing because they're doing some drilling here. So I wonder if they're exploring. Like I said, guys, all you got to do is miss by a couple feet sometimes. So that's the cenotaph. Onwards. 4,600 feet, guys. Pheonix. It's quite the town. Like a lot of places in British Columbia, it's a big place. Tailings. Tailings. We won't stop and look at tailings again. Unless you want to stop and look at tailings. Yeah. It doesn't look that good either, that ore. Or tailings. It's the difference between tailings and ore. But okay, but yeah, you can see, guys, that's Pheonix. It was the town site of Pheonix. It just became a big pit in the 70s. Got completely dug out. So you can see, look, tailings, more tailings, all over the place, guys. Tailings, 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 tailings. Gold, copper. And the thing to remember about copper, guys, is just because it's copper doesn't mean there's no gold. A lot of times, if there's copper, there's probably gold. And not even that. There's probably silver too, right? Same thing with like galena, which is just a mix of, and it varies depending on how, nice the galena is, but that's just a mix of silver, lead, zinc. So just because you're only finding one metal, the thing with hard rock is it's hard to tell what is actually in the rock, and sometimes it could be microscopic quantities of whatever's in the rock, but hard rock prospecting is a tonnage game, right? You have X amount of tons of rock, you have a purity level of like whatever percentage, and then that basically determines how much you're going to yield out of your total tonnage, right? So it's interesting to note that, like, because placer mining is usually just, you're just getting gold, right? You're not getting, in the Tulamine, certain special other areas, you might pick up other certain pieces of stuff, but for the most part, it's just placer gold. But hard rock mining is kind of on another level just because you get way more stuff and can usually pull in way bigger quantities. These guys could pick and choose what they took because there was so much of it. They weren't concerned about running out. They were more concerned about, well, what is the most advantageous ore to process for our current operation, because they want to get money. They don't want to process. If you got a piece of tailings that's 90% tailings and 10% ore, or 10% potential ore. Back in those days, that wasn't deemed good. That was garbage. That was throw that out. Why are we processing this? But it's a good road. I'm surprised it's paved, but you know what? It makes a lot of sense actually, because if people are coming up here to go skiing, then that would make sense. But it just seems weird that it's paved. I don't know. Getting a paving machine up here doesn't seem like it would be all that fun to do. So guys, if you like this kind of content, make sure you like and subscribe. Hit that bell icon to get notified. And Sasquatch Prospector out.